Right now, I do request all of you to kindly get your hands together and welcome our panelists. I'd like to welcome Meghna Suryakumar, founder and CEO at Crediwatch. A round of applause, please. Welcome, ma'am. I'd like to take the pleasure of welcoming S. Anand, the founder and CEO at PaySprint. Welcome, sir. I welcome Khizamboor, the Chief Delivery Officer at BFSI, LTIMindtree. A round of applause and welcome him up on stage. Thank you for joining us, sir. I'd like to welcome Namita Bhide, Managing Director, Denim Consulting. Welcome, ma'am. And this session will be moderated by Manoj Alandkar, co-founder at Finvu. A round of applause as I welcome him up on stage. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to commence with this session, and I hand over to our moderator. Mr. Manoj, take it forward, please.
We understand what is open banking, right? But just to take a perspective, right? So may I request Namita to say some few words?
Hello. Thank you so much for coming for our session. I know we're at the tail end of it, so we'll try and make it as lively as possible and get you to engage with us. So I think what I wanted to do is just talk a little bit about, at a very basic level, what open banking is. Open banking was initiated to force banks to collaborate. You know, there's obviously, I spent a lot of time with banks and I know what the issues can be, but principally the whole idea was how do you foster collaboration, and this is something that started to drive the whole open banking initiatives, I would say. 2008, 2009 onwards, there was a lot of discussions, and Europe was trying to pioneer around that, and also the UK. But I'm amazed at the work that India is doing, and I can't wait to hear all the other stories. I think some of the basic things, and I would say the big example that everybody can relate to is Uber, is a huge example of a disruption model which is totally around open banking. Everything from location to payments to all of that is a use case that all of us use. The other really everyday example is some cross-border payments or TransferWise and now known as Wise. All of these are great examples of how open banking is already being fostered and how can now that move forward into other models. And I think we don't realize that these are the models that are already up and running, and now they move into the world of banking and open finance, really, as things are moving forward. So the idea of how the ecosystem works together and enables better products and services and is really around customer centricity and efficiency. So I think these are some of the principles to drive open banking, and I think Meghna can talk through a lot of the amazing stuff that's happening around the whole India stack.
Hello. Yeah, hi. Good morning, everybody. So, to start with, like open banking kind of started in Europe and UK, where the regulators came up with the regulation PSD2, where they kind of forced banks to share, financial data through APIs for the first time, right? Because banks were very, very reluctant to share data. It was a very closed model with banking. And, the PSD2 regulations kind of paved the way for the concept of open banking, where the European regulators said in 3 years, you need to, build in technology, systems, and security to enable sharing of financial data within the system, right? And that was how open banking kind of started out in Europe. It was regulation driven, right? But now what's happened in other countries, especially India, is the concept of open banking and open finance is market driven. And that's what is most exciting, because I think that when we had the India stack and UPI really took off, we had the digital rails for an open banking infrastructure, especially in payments. Because the whole point of the PSD2 was to provide a more secure framework and more seamless customer experience with payments in Europe. And we did that with the India stack, with the digital rails that was built with the UPI, and that's kind of how open banking really started with, much more market forces and demand, kind of making it happen, right? So from that perspective, the India story of how we're at this point sort of pioneers in technologies and frameworks to kind of foster open banking and finance is quite fascinating. Now, after we had the UPI framework, of course, we have Sahamati, which is the AA regulations, where there was really the digital rails and infrastructure, and of course the industry coming together to share financial data. which is like the basic premise or the requirement for open banking. Now I think we have like about 28 banks that are on Sahamati, where banks are now already live to share financial data within the ecosystem with trusted third-party API providers, and a lot of technology solutions are being built to increase customer experience, to make to build out a lot of use cases that in finance and in lending, right? And I think many of my other fellow speakers will elaborate on many of those kind of use cases. So now right after the AA framework, we have OCEN, which is the Open Credit Enablement Network, which is now leveraging the AA system to kind of build use cases on lending and democratizing finance. And that's, I think, a very good use case for open banking, where it's again market-driven, right? Not much by regulation. And on top of that, what's happened is now the regulators are participating in the entire open finance, the digital infrastructure initiatives. So now we have one of the only few countries where we have other institutions like the SEBI, right, or the tax, the GST, where all of these data sources, other than financial data, the other sorts of data are going to become a part of the open banking, open finance initiatives, and that's going to be shared across the industries to build really useful use cases in wealth tech and in lending and finance. And that's kind of where I think India is kind of stealthily building solutions to pioneer open banking. And I think a lot of companies now have got approval from the RBI to do cross-border payment, and they're building a lot of solutions in stealth mode again on open finance from a global cross-border perspective.
Thank you, Namita. Thank you, Meghna. So, Ram, so now we understand open banking, right? So what are the different regulations in India or around the globe, and how can the TPPs benefit from it?
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm the only non-entrepreneur on this panel, but the good part is, as a system integrator, we serve banks and financial institutions globally. We also serve the L&T group firm. We have an NBFC called L&T Finance. If you've done your rounds here, you would have seen a big stall with the L&T color. So if you haven't, please suggest that you pay a visit. So we've served the group. We've also served global banks and financial institutions. I'm going to just pull back and then say this. On the horizon, we're starting to see a PSD3 starting to emerge. This was announced in June 2023. I'm going to pull back because I wanted to put a context to say, why do we need regulations around this? There are fundamentally four factors that drive regulators, sort of put regulation around this. The foremost is, customer privacy, data protection. It's extremely, extremely important. As a customer, I want convenience, but not at the cost of potentially a data compromise. My data being shared with actors in the market that I didn't intend to share data. So what data gets shared and who does it get shared with? As a consumer, I want control on that. So that's one. The second aspect of that is when data gets shared, now not just the banks, but all of these third-party aggregators now become a front line of defense. So you got to protect against fraud. So that's another critical area of what gets shared, how does it get shared, how do you protect against fraud? That's another one that regulation aims at governing that. The last two are establishing in some capacity a standard around data exchange. Because if this was to truly be democratized, what they are starting to talk about is open APIs, right? That enable open banking or open finance, as Namita said, right? It's got to evolve, because a lot of the use cases today are around payments, and it's got to sort of evolve into finance, open finance, right? So that's the third aspect of it. And the last one is fairness in competition. Because in some capacity, the purpose this is being done is in some capacity stop the monopoly of the large banks. So if you have to do that, then you'll have to allow players, third parties, sort of come in, TPPs sort of come in and sort of be able to leverage the data to sort of build value-added services on top of it. Started talking about PSD3, and then PSD3 starting to bring together elements of PSD2. And then there was in some geos, particularly in Europe, there was something called Payment Services Regulation, PSR. There's another one called FIDA, because a lot of the data that gets shared today is largely around payments. But now you want to possibly be able to share data much more, account data, much more beyond payments. So there's regulations on how can that be shared, and in what form and shape. So that's sort of what's in the horizon, and that's what is shaping, a lot of the work in the market around open banking. So if you think about, we talked about regulations, what factors drive regulations and what are the regulations. If you think about it, it's aimed at three parties: banks. So how do banks react to it? How do fintechs react to it? And how can they sort of take advantage in that market? And then how do service providers such as ourselves, SIs in the market, how do we enable that innovation to come through? Because a lot of times the banks and possibly the fintechs, don't have the wherewithals to drive that. As a sort of a market player, you have the ability to sort of bring multiple market players together. Yeah. So that's sort of how this is happening. Banks are starting to sort of say, I don't have to provide everything by myself. I'm going to pick up, niche players in the market that may provide sort of specific value-added services. I'm going to integrate them into the ecosystem, open APIs, yeah, for the bank. The second one is, the fintechs themselves. They're starting to create, and I'll give you one or two examples. You would think of the biggest example that comes to my mind is Solaris. Solaris as a license, but they talk about themselves as a fintech with a banking license. Sort of the extreme end of open banking. Because what they're now saying is, I have a banking license, I'm going to leave the burden on fintechs to have a banking license, or sort of overcome the limitations of not having a banking license. So that's what they are starting to do. And then you will see a range of fintechs, starting to play in areas where I can now aggregate data and I can potentially contextualize services that I provide to the players in the market. And someone like us, what we're starting to do is one of the things you'll have to do is when you're onboarding third parties, you'll have to certify third parties. Because you can possibly give access to third parties. This could be fintechs, this could be aggregators, account aggregators, but you have to have a way and a mechanism to sort of onboard them in a structured manner, certify them for access, because in some capacity as a bank, you own the customer. And if there is a compromise of data, you're liable for that. So in some manner, you manage that. So that's sort of how the landscape is evolving.
Just wanted to add, I think one of the things that is delaying in, I would say, different parts of the market is the trust mechanism. What the regulators are driving is behavior around premium APIs and identity APIs to make sure that there are standard in terms of how information flow moves. One of the big challenges in the West is around how do you make sure that if something goes wrong, there is traceability. So trust and traceability becomes a key part of how you can do things differently. And to something Ram was saying, banks are also providing banking as a service because they have the entire suite, or they do banking as a platform in certain markets. So for example, Standard Chartered goes into Africa, they unfold their banking as a platform, they'll do lending, they'll do all kinds of various products as white label solutions. So this is something which is driving innovation at every level of the financial ecosystem. So you're driving innovation, you're competing, and you're trying to manage cost and compliance. I think these are the four things that are driving a balance, if you like.
Thank you. So Anand, understanding this open banking strategies, right? Are there any customer-centric products?
Yeah, thanks, Manoj. Thanks for being here, guys. You're right. I think the whole ultimate objective of an open banking is to build solutions which are to customers, right? So it is to build better solutions for customers. Account aggregate, you rightly said, in India, most of it, it's been more like a, inorganic kind of growth that we had. And we had, the Indian stack coming up, and coming across an account aggregator kind of a model, right? So today we have, let's say, 28 banks on this particular, which gives you an access to start looking at all these accounts in terms of their balances, in terms of their statements. Now, what's more about it? So I think, at PaySprint, we've gone one step ahead, and we said, why don't you do something on what we have, right? So looking at all of that, can we create solutions, especially in terms of the in terms of pay in and payout solutions? Which allows them to use the data to do much more than that. Critically, in terms of trying to do, in terms of collections into your accounts, in terms of payouts into your accounts, can do much more. And I think and especially focused on the SME kind of a customer, because where they have a, it's a very inappropriate way of managing funds. They don't get loans because of what they do. So if you're able to bridge that gap and ensure you build everything together, it becomes a very efficient way of managing your funds, and which leads on to ultimately to, for you to start getting loans from lending agencies. So I think that brings value. I think the true essence of an account aggregation is that which will add value to somebody in the market, right? To some segment of the customers are able to use that. I think, and that's been one of the core, what we've been building at PaySprint. We've been trying to ensure that we, use this model, get across, do much more. So somebody who's using this across, we're able to, and in a single login is able to do whatever he wants to do. So he doesn't need to go to multiple logins, multiple accounts, worry where he has to make the payment, where the money is coming, and he doesn't need to do it. At one single login across all his accounts, he's able to access it. So I think that's been our endeavor, and I think that's how we've been using this to the next level. So that's been a very customer-focused centric approach that we've been able to build on this.
Thank you, Anand. So Meghna, what are the different use cases, internationally or in India, you think is emerging or right now is there?
Sure. So there are a lot of interesting use cases, that are emerging in open banking internationally and here in India. Imagine that, if you use, an e-commerce platform like Amazon anywhere globally, right now you could buy a gift card within, the e-commerce platform, and then you could assign it to someone, they can buy goods on it. But what if you could just, send $200 via the Amazon or a PayPal or a Facebook directly to somebody you want to gift, rather than, buying them a gift card. So these are the kind of use cases from a customer-centric, retail perspective that are going to emerge in open banking, where you'd just be able to send money through any platform. In the movement of money, it's going to be seamless. So in retail, there's going to be a lot of, different innovations that's going to come about from an international perspective. And many players like Facebook and Amazon and Google and Apple, all of them are kind of working towards this. That's on the retail side. Now on the business side, right, subscription management. So suppose you're like SaaS companies, your global SaaS companies, right? If you kind of have to get a view on a single dashboard of all of the different subscriptions from all your multi-accounts from all over the globe and locally and nationally, to be able to get a dashboard view so that you can manage your business better, right? That's going to be a use case that's going to evolve in terms of a B2B use case in open banking. And again, cross-border payments, that she was talking about. Imagine that you'd be able to, have like a, one single card that'll help you transact as a B2B business and invoice in multiple countries. I think that's already happening as a use case. So there are a lot of interesting solutions that are evolving around open banking, internationally and also here in India. In India, there's a lot of, use cases evolving around wealth tech, when you have a lot of platforms, wealth tech platforms that are able to kind of give you a single view from multiple bank accounts in terms of how to manage your investments and, in terms of what, your entire position in terms of your investment at one, within one dashboard. So there are many fintechs who are working on those sort of wealth tech solutions. Also in lending, right, and buy now, pay later. A lot of, innovations happen because of open banking in India, and there are a lot of solutions where you're able to leverage data across multiple bank accounts and also from several other sources like GSTN and other sources where data is available, alternative data about small businesses. And this is enabled what we call flow-based lending, right, where you're small businesses who don't have regular access to finance and may not have a really robust balance sheet and profit after tax can get a better access to capital at better interest rates because of the current last 3 months or the recent transactions or evolution of their business. And this again is it can happen when there's robust sharing of financial data across platforms that would enable these companies to score better with the lenders. So these are some of the use cases that are emerging.
Just add a couple more. I think the few things that you're seeing globally is a lot of work around sustainability. And how do you drive towards the COP28 agenda? So what banks are doing is partnering with other fintechs to drive carbon offset. So can you look at your carbon footprint? Can you calculate that? I think the second thing, and a lot of amazing things are happening in India, is around the agricultural tech side of things, where how do you drive better loans for farmers? There's a lot of work happening from a remote sensing perspective. You're trying to understand how can you get that data to see what the farmers have produced, a few years in a row, and then able to give them loans basis that. So what is interesting is it's really going across beyond banking and moving into open finance. There's lots of work happening around insurance. And I think the drive is to be able to give clients, and very focused on how customers can get access to better products easily, and also easier customer focus and hyper-personalization of what they specifically need. I think what Anand was talking about from an SME perspective, there's a huge gap in the market around expense management. These are low-hanging fruits that automation will drive change in a very big way. So I think, while we are talking a lot of things happening internationally, I think India is a phenomenal example of all the interesting real use cases that are being solved for to drive real problems, right? So I think there's a combination of things that are happening, but really sustainability is a huge part. How do you use AI, machine learning to do some of that other pieces of work?
Thank you. So Anand, we talked about customer-centric, right? What about external party, like collaborations that you guys can do?
I think, Manoj, the entire, what's very interesting, especially in this current context of the fintech growth story in India, is it's actually not it's not a competitive growth story. It's a collaborative growth story. And what we're seeing across board today is that organizations are collaborating with each other to create solutions and products. If you created something, you don't really go across and start from scratch. You really collaborate. You start working together, and that's a very different. At least in the entire so many years, I've never seen a phase where there's so much of collaboration happening across. And I think the realization, one thing has been there, that the market potential and size is quite huge. And there's so much to do. We're just starting off. And there's so much to do. And and if you collaborate, our ability to go to market becomes much faster and easier. So let's say typically in our case, we work across with banks, we work across with, a lot of organizations who probably give solutions. And the first thing that we really do is that if we have a similar solution available in the market, why not look at it? And if that can be a seamless kind of integration and work around, I think it makes easier for us to do, rather than starting from scratch, building it up ourselves. And I think those days are gone. And because one is that the opportunity size is huge. Secondly, there's so much more problem solving needs to be done. And you must have a vision of saying that you must do it fast, and if you need to fail, you fail it fast and you move on fast, right? So you just can't be in a situation where you can keep perpetually doing something and not knowing whether it works or not, right? So even from that perspective, I think, and that's been a very, very change that I've seen at least the last 5-7 years, that a lot of collaboration across banks, fintechs, companies, ERPs, across fintechs I've seen. So it's been a massive, and that's, I feel it's the what is driving this growth story today in India. So very important for us to be collaborative.
Thank you. But what about partnership dynamics, like the risk sharing, or the one that you don't like, revenue sharing?
No, I think it's a good question. But I feel it's whether it's a risk sharing, a lot of are very well defined in terms of risk sharing. You saw recently RBI coming on with lending, FLDG talking about risk sharing. I think and what's good about the industry is that many times we innovate, we do things, right? And then when it grows to a certain extent, you see regulators coming in and, trying to put things. And that's a good way, because you are allowing to innovate, get across to some kind of a scale, and then, you would really want to come back and say, okay, this is how you really want to put in some regulations around it. And that's really fair. It allows you to, in the first stage, it allows you to innovate in a much faster way. So that's good. And, if it's a collaborative way, and I think all of us need to share revenues, we must. I think the game is of volume in India now. It's probably not. So if its quantity is there, I think, and you're building a good product, I'm sure you should be able to get revenues in place.
So you don't believe in that You saying?
So I think I like to use the word cooperation. I think one of the big things about how the ecosystem collaborates is about how do you partner up to deliver the last mile to the customer. But I think the key part is how do you have commercial frameworks to make sure that you deliver in the right format. If something goes wrong, there's accountability. I think that's the key thing that's driving success. It can't be that, oh, you and I have just met, we've agreed that we'll partner up. There has to be formality to make sure that what is delivered as a trusted platform gets delivered to the last mile. So that seems like the way to go, and the structure around that makes the regulators happy as well.
Yeah, so in terms of collaboration, I think there's certain already established frameworks. For example, in OCEN, you have the TSP, which is a technology service provider, who would collaborate with the bank to kind of create the rails for everyone to plug in to have the open data sharing, right? So that's one way. Then you also on top of that, you would have the credit bureaus and other trusted third-party providers who would come in and collaborate on various revenue sharing models to build different kind of scores or advanced solutions to enable lending. So I think OCEN is a great example of how 7 different kind of market participants are going to collaborate, share revenue, and share data, right? So, and a lot of product innovation, a lot of use cases. So again, this is a market-driven approach that we've taken in India using public goods.
So I think it's going to unlock value. I think there is enough revenue for every participant. It's going to unlock value. And when it unlocks value, it's got sort of has an exponential growth for everybody. So, and I think the closed networks are a thing of the past. So you want to think of open banking as ecosystems and an open ecosystems. And the standards, drive a tremendous amount of transparency. We're also seeing convergence to be able to sort of scale that model. We're also starting to see convergence on a financial messaging standard such as ISO 20022, because, and it's sort of becoming, as a tech enthusiast, you're going to assume it's going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's really, we're starting to see banks saying, can I run payments and cards messages on ISO 20022? So we're starting to see a tremendous amount of convergence. And I think there is room for every participant. And I'll give you one example. What Experian is doing, traditionally your credit scores are considered a function of you taking a loan from somebody and repaying it on the agreed terms. That's how your credit history builds. But that doesn't have to be the case. If I'm paying my utility bills on time, that can add to my credit history. In some capacity, that is a demonstration of me managing my finances responsibly as a consumer. So they're starting to, through open banking, what Experian is starting to do is to say, can I get access to that data? I'm making payments, I'm making rental payments, I'm paying to the utilities, I'm paying my mortgages on time. Can that now sort of contribute to credit scoring? Phenomenal. It's sort of, again, it puts back what Anand was saying, it puts back consumer right in the middle of how you solve for these use cases. And then I'll take one more example. Home buying or mortgage for the banks was always the loan that you're taking from the bank to buy the mortgage. Home buying was not considered an experience. For a consumer, you're making choices of a lifetime. You're starting to sort of go through a home buying experience. So that experience as a whole is important, while the lending part is critical. So banks have traditionally truncated the whole lending experience. So with use cases such as this, now marketplaces, where you find properties, listings, you select the property, maybe even virtually visit the properties that are of interest to you, connect with the real estate agents that can help you close that. So all of that experience now gets embedded. So experience is another aspect that's going to get significantly better whether you're a consumer or a corporate.
Head office or somewhere in Bangalore, right? But so what about that customer education about trust?
Okay, so I spoke about regulations pivoted on consumer privacy and data protection. So what PSD2 is in India has always done a strong customer authentication. SCA is something that you would have heard. India has always done. So what it enforces is a two-factor authentication. Who you are and what do you have with you as a proof of that identity. Yeah. So I think markets that didn't have is now starting to say SCA is mandatory because account data is getting shared. So a TPP can now take data and act on behalf of the bank. Because they're now aggregating data from multiple sources and potentially have the ability to lend to you. And how do you make sure that data is... So to your question, trust is managed through additional compensatory controls that sort of now become part of the regulation. India and Singapore have taken a sort of a bit of a hybrid approach to this open banking. They're saying, I'm going to federate, because in some capacity, if you regulate this very strongly, it curtails innovation. Yeah, so India and Singapore have taken an approach saying that I'm going to lay some foundation. So that's why even in that data privacy bill, the customer data privacy bill that was introduced, it seemed very loose and it seemed intentional to me. Whereas some other geos, like Europe, UK, places even like Brazil, Mexico, they've taken a lot more prescriptive approach to open banking and open banking regulations. The trade-offs are going to play out in the market, but I think it seems like two different approaches seem to work well for the respective geos.
Thank you. So we're come towards the end of the session, so maybe we can, if you have any questions, we can take them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi there, my name is Nizad. I'm working for Amana Bank, Sri Lanka. So just one question actually to Meghna. You spoke about traceability. So how do you strike a balance between traceability and privacy concerns of customers in the open banking context?
So, one of the, hazards or, some things that we need to be careful when we share financial data, across different platforms and players is obviously data privacy and data security. So if you actually look at it from an international perspective, like all the other panelists rightly pointed out, regulation is kind of being prescriptive and it's driving data privacy. So if you look at the new PSD3 that's coming, right, the new regulations are going to be kind of stricter than what was there in terms of payment security, regulations in the 2016 to 2018 kind of regime in Europe. But in India, we are still not regulating yet, but we do have the data privacy laws that are coming in, and also the checks and balances that are put in on a framework level. If you just look at the Sahamati framework or OCEN itself, right, there are do's and don'ts of how to handle data. If you're an account aggregator, you can't make use of the data. You're just a pass-through or the digital rails, and that goes to the trusted third-party provider, right? That's and you have to put in the kind of digital infrastructure to be an AA, to be approved as an AA, to ensure that the privacy and data security is kind of, in place, right? Then there are a lot of solutions evolving in blockchain that makes traceability, way better. And there are a lot of companies that are working in stealth mode right now, especially on a data exchange level and for payments, where the traceability is kind of much more, it's easier because of the technologies, right? So I'm sure that's kind of where you were coming from too, right? So in India, it's kind of more market driven. Regulators are not putting in really, hard and fast rules in terms of, to regulate the open banking or the digital rails, because we've kind of seen that the way UPI has kind of created a world record in terms of fact that it was just market driven, and now we are number one in terms of digital transactions in the world. So based on that, the learning for us is to ensure that we foster innovation but put in checks and balances. So that's happened through the frameworks that we have on the digital rails and some of the regulations that are kind of loosely protecting us at this point in time. And I think fintechs, in India, all of us are kind of now have a very collaborative, let's say, relationship with the regulators, and we're talking to them openly about privacy issues, about security issues, and we're in dialogue constantly. RBI is coming up with sandboxes, and they're testing out use cases to ensure that when such kind of data is shared across different market players, what kind of impact would it have on the end consumer? So, regulatory sandboxes, a lot of dialogue with regulators, the upcoming data privacy regulations, and of course the market-driven rails that is really fostering innovation is the way we are handling these issues.
We can take one more question. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Bhageshri. I am into product and portfolio in Kotak Bank for credit cards. Brilliant session. Thank you so much. I agree to all of you that there is a lot of data, and open banking has helped banking and fintechs in a man-mouth way. But how to take this ahead into conversion percentage? So how to catch the right customer at the right time, at the right place? Can AI come into picture? Can we take something, best practices from global markets? How to work on that?
I'll start, a loaded question, but an important question to answer, isn't it? I mean, if you have to really banks or if you're a fintech, where is the money is the question.
Yes.
And how do I sort of capitalize? I'll tell you one interesting use case we're solving for a bank. If you have existing customers, as consumers, you're often widely leveraged. You're actually using multiple financial institutions. You're not banking with just one financial institution. And you've chosen either a product base or opportunistically in a life stage, you've banked with multiple banks and you continue to keep those relationships. So we're starting to do something with one of the banks in the region about open banking providing an ability to sort of understand where your money is going. And those present opportunities, and if the interventions are provided in a very timely fashion, if I'm, for instance, investing through a bank, whereas my payroll is with somebody else, I have the ability to know that for whatever reasons, I have not provided those interventions to the customer, that the customer is choosing to invest through somebody else, right? Or paying my bills through somebody else. I could be a SME business, but I'm actually have my business account with somebody else. So we're starting to build something called Money in Motion. And what Money in Motion tells you, informs you as a bank or a fintech, if you're providing solutions, is an ability for you to know where that money is going. And are there opportunities for you to then use techniques like AI, ML to say, can I actually learn? Can I model, say, determine what the next best action could be for a customer, and then potentially extend that? So those are the sort of use cases. But fundamentally, at the core, open banking enables you to sort of learn those patterns.
All right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. Firstly, to our panel, ladies and gentlemen, a big, big round of applause. Great momentum to discussions ensuing here. And to each and every one of you for your participation. Once again, I'd like to apologize.